If you're like me, you love discovering new tips to maximize your vacation, but some of those tips that I've tried just don't work as well as they sound. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. I love trying new cruise tips and tricks that I find, especially ones that people swear by on the internet, because ultimately I hope that they're effective. They're ways that you can really make your cruise better, and in many cases, they are really good tips. We've shared some of these on our channel before, like buying magnets for your cabin to increase the storage ability of your room, or to research shore excursions in advance, booking your cruise early, and of course, flying in a day, at least ahead of time for your sailing. But there have been some other ones that I've tried that are so-called secrets, and they're just not as effective as I thought they would be, and ultimately, I was disappointed by them. In a lot of cases, it may be more of a mesh of my personality and travel style than them not being completely effective at all. As an example, saving money by booking an inside cabin is a really good piece of advice unless you're claustrophobic or you're always used to staying in upscale hotel rooms. So, I reviewed and thought about the tips that I've taken over the years and came up with my list of 8 cruise tips that made sense until I got on board the cruise ship. Number 1 is to avoid overpacking. A lot of people advocate to avoid overpacking for a cruise, and I think this is rooted in avoiding hefty luggage costs with the airlines rather than having any true benefit to you on the actual cruise ship. Now, the travel world has become obsessed with minimalist packing, where you travel with as little luggage as possible. Perhaps you've heard people trying to go on a cruise with just a carry-on suitcase. And I have to admit, I got caught up in this trend as well and started packing less and less so that I could reuse clothing on the ship. There is some truth to the idea that you don't have to have an entire outfit for every night for dinner plus a daytime outfit. However, I found that by packing less clothing, it really gave me more anxiety than satisfaction. What I mean is, I felt like I was rationing clothes. And as the cruise went on, I was constantly like, oh gosh, I'm gonna run out of clean clothing. And I was always kind of trying to figure out like, well, can I rewear this clothing? Would anyone notice it? Is it truly clean? Is it truly dirty? It just kind of annoyed me more than anything else. Now, of course, I could use Royal Caribbean's laundry services, but that's pricey. It takes a day or longer to get back to you. I could have washed at least some of my clothes in the bathroom sink and then held them up to dry somewhere in the cabin or on the balcony, but I find that's not that effective and it gets really wrinkly, plus I'm lazy. Ultimately, I realized a minimalist approach to packing is fine for some people, especially if you're flying a low-cost carrier that you want to avoid fees with. But I don't fly Spirit, Frontier, or Breeze, and I rarely fly to my cruises in general because I live in Florida. Moreover, when I do fly, I'm going to inevitably need to pay for one piece of luggage per person traveling, so I'll just maximize that suitcase. I'm not going to worry about trying to squeeze everything into a carry-on or a backpack or anything like that. The second tip that really didn't work out well for me was not paying for internet access on the ship. Another way to save money is to, well, skip buying an internet package. And there is, of course, truth that you will spend less money if you don't buy an internet package. Now, there's no free Wi-Fi on a Royal Caribbean ship beyond, of course, to be able to use the Royal Caribbean app. And a package for the duration of your cruise will probably easily cost over $100 per person. So this compels some people to maybe skip the internet completely and save the money there. And while there's no doubt that it will save you money, I just don't find it practical at all. Admittedly, I am a geek, and being on the internet is more important to me than perhaps other people. I think it's only when you don't have internet access at all that you realize how many things you rely on for the internet besides like email and web browsing, texting with family, checking weather forecasts before you leave the ship, paying bills on time, and all the little things that are great to have the internet for on a cruise. They really do add up. Plus, I don't equate internet access with being any more or less relaxed. There are plenty of distractions on a cruise ship beyond the internet, so besides not checking my work email, I think having Wi-Fi provides another form of entertainment in addition to books, magazines, or movies. So I'm all for saving money, but I'm not going to skimp on Wi-Fi. Number 3 on my list is skipping shore excursions and staying on board the ship. Something you hear from a lot of experienced cruisers is you could stay on board the ship during the ports of calls in order to take advantage of what's available on board. Now, the rationale for this tip is that you can save money on a costly shore excursion. Plus, there's already plenty of entertainment and activities to do on your ship. And with so many people off the ship, lines and waits for top activities are much less, such as water slides. Now, once again, there is truth to this recommendation, except I feel cooped up when I'm on the ship instead of exploring or just doing something in port. I love to cruise because of the amazing places I get to visit. And to me, it seems counterintuitive to skip out on the fun things to do in port. Now, granted, if you've been to a port a dozen times, I may not feel that compelled to go out and walk around. I'm looking at you, Nassau. But whenever I've tried this tip and stayed on board the ship, I feel like I'm a dog staring longingly out the window with dreams of going outside. The workaround for this tip is to do actually both. I like this idea, but I'm going to kind of make it hybrid, where I get off the ship early, do something on shore, but then get back on board early so I can still take advantage of less lines around the ship. Another tip that really didn't work well for me was to eat only at complimentary restaurants. I'm talking about the restaurants that are included in your cruise fare. Now, the longer the sailing, the less I tend to agree with this tip because I really like variety in my dining. While specialty dining does indeed definitely cost more, I'm on vacation and not trying to save money on my lunches at work. So splurging is what makes part of vacation fun, I think. Now, I do enjoy dinners in the main dining room or the Windjammer, but once I get to like day 4 or 5 of the cruise, I'm usually ready to change things up a bit. Having a few sushi rolls at Izumi or ordering a bowl of pasta at Giovanni's, or better yet, getting a burger and nachos at Playmakers is a guilty pleasure that I'll go for every single time. And yeah, it does cost a bit more money, but I feel like it is worth it. The next tip I tried and really regretted was bidding to upgrade my cabin. So I love the idea of paying less to get more, but I have stopped bidding for stateroom upgrades. If you're very flexible and don't really care where your room is located, then Royal Up might be fine for you. But I can't get past a couple of issues with it. Now, of course, if you're not familiar with Royal Up, this is the opportunity to bid for a stateroom upgrade. Basically, you book your regular room, and then you tell Royal Caribbean different amounts of money you'd be willing to bid should that room become available. It's a blind bidding program. You have no idea if the room is available or what anyone else bid, but there is an option there. My first problem with Royal Up is just because there's an option to bid doesn't actually mean there is room to upgrade to, and I think a lot of new cruisers miss that detail. The truth is, Royal Up exists as a backup mechanism for Royal Caribbean in case somebody cancels at the very last minute. In the old days, when someone canceled at the last minute, they were stuck with an unsold room. These days, they can move somebody up with Royal Up to get more money from that and then resell the original room that that person moved up from and possibly get someone in there. Of course, it's always easier to get cheaper rooms at a last minute deal, so that's why it's like win-win altogether, at least for the cruise line anyway. The problem is Royal Caribbean puts out these Royal Bid offers like, hey, why don't you bid for a stateroom upgrade? And I think a lot of people can misconstrue that as, hey, there's an actual room I can move up to with the right bid amount. And the reality is there's not. And in some cases, people get, I think, confused. They may get frustrated or even angry that their bid didn't actually work out. But the more troubling problem with Royal Up is if your bid is actually accepted, you can't select where your room is located. I think it's really important to pick a good cabin location to avoid noise problems, and you lose that ability when you have a Royal Up bid that's accepted because a winning bid means the cruise line will pick where your cabin is located. And this is actually one of the most important tips that I do agree with, which is picking a good location can make a big difference in your cruise experience. The next tip is waiting to book another cruise until you get on board the ship. You can get onboard credit and reduce deposits by booking a cruise on a cruise ship. It's totally true, but I think it's a mistake to wait for your cruise to book one. I get this question all the time on our YouTube lives. We do it every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The problem with booking a cruise in Next Cruise is if you know in the weeks or months leading up to a sailing which cruise to book, you'd be actually setting yourself up for a problem. By waiting until you get on board the ship to book it, the price may increase to the point that it offsets the benefits of getting extra onboard credit in the first place. Basically, if you thought about, hey, I want to book a cruise, and at that moment, the cruise cost $2,000. And then by the time you actually got on board your cruise to book it at Next Cruise, the price has gone up to $3,000. Well, that, a couple $100 of onboard credit is negated by the increase in the price. Royal Caribbean cruise prices are very fluid and can change at any time. Over the course of days, weeks, or months, the price will almost certainly increase. So my advice is if you know there's a cruise you want to book now, go ahead and contact your travel agent to book it now. Next Cruise is great for when you're on board the ship and you're suddenly struck with the idea, hey, let's book another cruise, and then bam, you should go definitely down Next Cruise and book it while on board because it is free money in that situation. I have a hit or miss approach to this next tip, which is to book the cheapest cabin. Cutting corners and saving money where you can find it is definitely a good financial strategy, but you also have to weigh the pros and cons of going cheap versus enjoying your well-deserved vacation. It can be difficult to know if you should book the cheapest room on a cruise or spend extra for a nicer cabin. If you shop by price alone, you may end up with a cruise cabin that you're stuck with for the duration of the sailing. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, but it may clash with what you're used to on land because you're probably going to end up with a small inside cabin. Cruise ship cabins are typically much smaller than hotel rooms to begin with on land, and the smallest rooms on a ship are really small, coming in at less than 300 square feet. If you're sharing this space with somebody else, then that lack of space can be really problematic. Everyone has a budget to work with, so I get that, but you really should be realistic about your cabin choice so you don't end up walking into your room and then realize you've made a terrible mistake. And the last cruise tip that really didn't make any sense until I got on board the ship was the over-the-door shoe organizers as a way to save space. There are so many great inside cabin hacks out there, but one I tried that I won't ever do again is definitely bring an over-the-door organizer. This is a classic, sounds better than it is scenario because you go to the dollar store and buy one of these and put it on the back of your cabin door or bathroom door. The idea is that you'll add more storage options, especially for shoes and toiletries. And on cruise ships that are kind of old and lack a lot of storage space, especially families, this can be a really cool idea. In my experience, I was very disappointed with how useful it really was. First of all, I found the thing flops around way too much on the cabin door, which leads to things falling out all the time. Not to mention, in some cases, I go to close the door and it gets stuck in the door. It was really annoying. Plus, unless you're sailing on a really old cruise ship, I just don't have the problem of finding storage, especially if your cruise is less than a week. Plus, I think it's way better to actually invest in cruise magnets to help get clutter off your floors, and it works better for my style of cruising. There you go. There's my list of 8 cruise tips that probably work for some people, but I thought it just sounded way better than it was, and when I used it on board the ship, I was disappointed by it. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on cruise tips that just sounded better than they really are, and do you agree or disagree with me on that? I'm sure some of you are definitely going to disagree. I can already see the comments. I think the shoe organizer and probably the next cruise booking are going to be the 2 that I'm going to get the most comments about, but hey, maybe I'm wrong on that. While you're down below, already hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, YouTube lets you have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.